We're looking at the purity of wisdom tonight, and there's a bit of feedback here. So, if you look at football, what's that game all about, really? It's about people bashing each other. It's about throwing a little piece of pigskin filled with air, and sometimes they deflate the pigskin. Remember Deflategate, all that stuff. But basically, football is about giving each other a concussion. And so tonight, I hope I don't give you a concussion with my sermon, my talk. Anyways, it's about the purity of wisdom. And so just go to the next slide. I just want to show you, no, too far. Back it up once. Yeah, I just wanted to, these are some materials which I've consulted. And Bible commentaries, my quest to study Bible, and so forth. So a lot of the stuff is from other sources. It's not just my material. Now, next slide. In this slide here, I tried to find. I always like to have a picture before I start a talk that's related to the talk, and I found this on the internet, and it's called The Way of Wisdom. And if you look in the picture, you'll see that there's a winding path, and it's crooked. And Proverbs 3:6 says, "In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." So this is a crooked path, and it begins with choices that you make at the beginning. And so those choices will bring you to relationships with different people, and can bring you to follies and temptations. And then if you walk further along the path, if you're finished school, you're thinking about a career. And then of course, if you look deeper and deeper into the woods, you can't see the trail ahead, and so you're looking into the unknown. And it's only God's wisdom that can straighten this path out to you. Some relationships are not so good for us. And then we get into all sorts of problems, follies and temptations. And it's only as we walk the straight path, and it's only as God gives us the wisdom to negotiate all these curves, can we be successful Christians. Now, the word in Hebrew, by the way, for righteous is straight. Okay, so a person who is righteous is a person who walks a straight line. Now, the other reason why I chose this picture is because I used to work in the bush in British Columbia. I'm from British Columbia, Vancouver. And in the summer times, I used to work in the bush. And let me just do one thing here. Okay, there's something not right here. Hang on. So I used to work in the bush. And so I was a surveyor. I worked with a logging company, and I basically financed my education by working in the bush. And so we were sent deep into the forest once to cut a fire trail. And then we finished our work, and we were coming back. This is near a little creek called Tahumming Creek. It's an Indian word. And so we couldn't find the trail. And so I was more experienced than my other team member. There were three of us. And I had been working in the bush for a number of years, and they weren't experienced as I. So I told my two companions, "You guys stay here. I'm going to scout ahead and try to find this trail." And of course, I'm the more experienced one. And, I know what I'm doing. But actually, I was a little bit arrogant, and it turned out to be not too wise. I wasn't too wise, actually. And then very quickly, I got deeper into the bush, and then I couldn't find the trail, and I quickly discovered that I was lost. I couldn't find my way back. Everywhere I looked, it looked the same. And if you look at this picture here, if you go deeper into the woods, wherever you look, it's the same. And it's easy to get lost. And so I was not wise. But And, if you've ever been lost, especially if you've been lost in the bush like this, which is totally remote and nobody can get to you. By the way, we did have bears in the area. And so you start to panic. The first thing that happens is you panic. Oh no, I'm lost. What's going to happen? And then you sort of calm down, and then you think, well, my friends aren't too far away, so if I scream out to them, they should hear me. So I did. And I heard their voices in the distance, and I knew, it came from that direction. And I found them. So it's about choices. And, you got to pay attention to things. And if you don't pay attention, you can make choices which lead you off the path, and you can get lost, and you can wreck your life, so to speak. Well, I want to just say a few words, general comments about wisdom, and these are from various sources. In Hebrew, of course, the word is hakam, and in Greek, it's Sophia. And in the Old Testament, wisdom, by the way, I put my notes up there so you can follow along. And if you want a copy of these, you can ask me and I can email you a copy. But yes, in the Old Testament, wisdom is used in connection with skill. For instance, a garment maker was wise. A sailor who knew how to sail a boat was wise. Metal worker, metalsmith, who knows how to work with metal. All right? So it's about skills. And so we're talking about how the skill of living life. So in God, wisdom is the infinite, perfect comprehension of all that is or might be. God knows everything. In man, what is wisdom? Well, it's an eminently practical attribute, which includes, for instance, it could include technical skill. It could include, for instance, military prowess, especially in the Old Testament. We see that there are military leaders and so forth, military prowess, shrewdness. These are terms that we come across in the description of wisdom. Today, we would use such words as know-how, for instance. Emotional intelligence, people who have insight into how other people work internally, their psychology. We might use the expression emotional intelligence. Or we could use the term understanding or insight, good sense, astuteness, perceptiveness, common sense. These are all words which are connected with wisdom. And wisdom is also shown in getting desired ends by effective means. It's the skill of living a life that honors God. So that's what we're going to focus in tonight. The skill of living a life that honors God. Next slide. So as we read in the scriptures, God is a source of wisdom as of power, and wisdom is given to men through the fear of the Lord. And we're going to say something about the fear of the Lord a little bit later. The wisdom of Solomon was far-reaching in his ability to rule in statecraft, in understanding human nature, in understanding natural history, literature, popular proverbs. Solomon was a very wise man, but even this wise man became foolish later on in his life. But at least he prayed for wisdom, and God gave him wisdom and blessed him. And so he was, at least for a while, in his golden period, Solomon was quite the leader, and was, had ability to rule people and understand people, and even understand the natural world and literature and so forth. In Proverbs 8, wisdom is personified in terms related to the concept of the creative word or logos of God. And New Testament writers, when they were looking back at wisdom and reading about wisdom, we're not going to look at the portion of wisdom that talks about wisdom and her connection with creation. We don't have time to do that. But wisdom, or at least the New Testament writers, when they read about wisdom and her antiquity, they thought immediately of Christ, but not in a direct correspondence. It's a typology, not that it's a direct one-to-one correspondence. In John 1:1-3, we read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and God was with God." And God was the Word. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. The Holy Spirit is sometimes referred to as the Spirit of wisdom. In Pauline thought, Christ is the Sophia of God. Christ is the wisdom of God. Next slide. So just going to run through what we're going to look at. In the lesson given by wisdom, the narrator in verses 1 to 3 is probably a father teaching his son by contrasting the purity of wisdom to ladies of the night. And if you read Proverbs 6 and 7, you'll see that there's a lot of talk there about adultery, about ladies of the night, seductive ladies and so forth, and other follies. And then the use of personification is best understood as a communication of God's will to mankind designed to move us to respond in faith and obedience. In other words, God is using personification to speak to us. And then we see that the lesson is given by wisdom herself. She speaks as if she were alive. Okay? Wisdom clearly and with dignity pleads with men to receive and declares the treasures of her reward in verses 4 to 21. And then wisdom's part in creation is set forth. We don't have time to look at that. She finally adds her own exhortation to cleave to her in verses 32 to 36. Now there's also, as I mentioned, Christological significance to Proverbs 8. From the earliest centuries, Christians have interpreted Proverbs 8 Christologically. New Testament writers saw in the personification, antiquity, and authority of wisdom to reveal God's will as a type of Christ, not a one-to-one correspondence, but simply an analogy. So they saw in wisdom something about Christ, although they realized that it wasn't a one-to-one correspondence. Proverbs does not describe a Messiah, but New Testament writers looking back at wisdom saw a typology of Christ. And Paul sees wisdom as having its full meaning only in Christ, 1 Corinthians 1:24. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Theophilus of Antioch in the 3rd, I think 4th century actually, was the first to use the term Trinity. And he speaks of God, his word, and his wisdom. And in those days, of course, the idea of the Trinity was not it was developing. The theology of the Trinity was kind of developing. And so he wasn't so clear about the functions of between the Son and the Spirit. But he referred to God, his word, and his wisdom. Next slide. Well, let's look at some of the verses. Proverbs 8, chapter 1 to 5. She speaks to mankind. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way, where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gate leading into the city, at the entrance she cries aloud. To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You who are simple, gain prudence. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. So it begins with this narrator and then quickly moves to wisdom speaking for herself. And as I mentioned, the narrator is probably a parent, a teaching parent, contrasting wisdom, the pure wisdom, with other strange and immoral women, as seen in the earlier chapters. So to get to full understanding of this chapter, you need to read the earlier chapters, and you'll see that in these earlier chapters, these women of the night are mentioned, and the teacher is warning his son not to have anything to do with these women. Wisdom addresses mankind. It cries out like a street preacher. I don't know if you've ever heard street preaching. I have done street preaching in Italy. I was a short-term missionary, and we used to do street preaching, and we used to cry out to the people and try to get them to stop and listen to us. And this is like wisdom. She is like a street preacher calling out, addressing mankind. It stands out in public places, unlike the strange women who lurk in streets and squares in the dark of night. Her speech is public and for all, not secretive or seductive. She meets you at the entrance to the city and cries aloud. She raises her voice to mankind, to those lacking in judgment, to the simple and foolish. She says, gain discernment, shrewdness, and prudence. I have to give to you, and you just need to ask. It's available. Wisdom speaks what is noble and precious in verses 6 to 11. Listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true. For my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. So wisdom is very confident in her sound words. She speaks credibly, and hardened, foolish men still have a chance to learn. Wisdom's words are true, straightforward, and sincere. But I just learned that sincere means without wax. Right? Sincere. Wisdom speaks rightly and detests wickedness. Wisdom is just, not crooked or perverse. To the discerning and upright, to those who have understanding, they know that the words of wisdom are right. And knowing that one needs wisdom is the first sign of having it. And I think we all need wisdom. That in itself is wise. Indicates that you're on the road to wisdom. We all need wisdom. She offers a rich reward, far richer than the things that men strive for. The things that she gives are peace, future, and being able to live correctly, live right, to please God. Such things are more important than the wealth in the world. There are people that are very wealthy, and they're some of the most troubled people around. We're always worried about their wealth. And there was this one CEO of this one company, and he was on television, and he was speaking to his people. What do you call them? Shareholders or whatever. He was speaking to them, and he said he heard that there's another CEO was trying to drive down our stocks. He said, "If I have him here, I'd eat his heart out." That's what he said. I'd eat his heart. That's how they are. Cutthroat. Wisdom is not like that. Wisdom is gentle. She teaches us how to live righteous lives. She gives us the skill set to do the right things. Wisdom gives righteous counsel to rulers. Verses 12 to 16. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior, and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me kings reign, and rulers issue decrees that are just. By me princes govern, and nobles, all who rule on earth. So she's explaining what she is. She gives us further insight into who she is and what she is, as she speaks highly of herself. Wisdom is demonstrated in actual life by discernment, and possesses knowledge and understanding, shows insight and know-how, And she wants to give that to us. Know-how. Wisdom is connected to the fear of the Lord. She hates evil, pride, evil behavior, and perverse speech, as does God. So these are important things to think about. Are we evil? Are we prideful? Is our behavior evil? Is our speech perverse? Well, wisdom does not lead us in that direction. Wisdom hates that, as does God. She has counsel, sound judgment, insight, and power. That's what wisdom is. That's what we need. By wisdom, kings reign and issue just laws. And one day the Messiah will reign by wisdom. She guides rulers and nobles. She's accessible if we seek after her. So she wants us to walk the straight path. And she helps us to do that. Honor and wealth to those who love her, verses 17 to 21. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness, along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me, and making their treasuries full. You want to be rich? Well, follow the path of wisdom. Don't seek after riches that can rust and that moths can eat. I don't think moths can eat Canadian dollars because they're made out of plastic, almost, if you look at the Canadian. But anyways, other things can rust out. And our Canadian dollars is almost worthless. But anyways, you don't want to trust those kinds of riches. She loves those who love her. She's accessible. Wisdom confers great riches upon those who love her, the greater because they are righteously obtained. The fruit of wisdom is better than fine gold. Those who walk with wisdom find paths of justice. They find pleasant places, pleasant paths, and a life which is rewarding, not because it offers material possessions, but because it offers a relationship with God. And who wouldn't want to have a relationship with God, to walk with him day by day and have him as your friend? Those who choose wisdom are rich in this sense beyond measure. Righteousness is a fruit that is better than gold. Now, if you lack wisdom, there's a promise in the scripture. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Now, this is one thing that God will give us. Sometimes you ask, well, if I pray for something, will God give it? And sometimes you don't know if God will give you something if you pray about it. But there's one thing that God will give you. If you ask for wisdom, he will give you wisdom. And he doesn't find fault. And so this is something which he'll give you in abundance if you ask him. And so we can be sure of that. So if you lack wisdom, just ask God for wisdom. Wisdom addresses her audience. This is the end of the psalm, or the chapter 8 rather. Now, my children, listen to me. She concludes her discourse here. Listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instructions and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. Wisdom reminds them that to love her brings life, and to hate her brings death. Those who miss her, fail to find her, they sin or miss the mark. So in Hebrew, the word for sin has to do with missing the mark. So think of a target and you miss the target, then that's a sin. To miss wisdom is to wrong oneself. To hate her is to commit suicide. So let's not hate her, but let's embrace her. Well, let's just sum this up now. So we've seen that wisdom takes a public stand, not one in the shadows. She wants everybody to embrace her, to know her. She calls to the simple. She invites all to listen. She is precious, and she calls us to love her, not some strange woman of the night shadows. She calls us to have right relationships. She calls us to fear the Lord. Wisdom affirms that righteous words result in righteous actions. This is a social virtue that has in view the good of one's community. Wisdom brings prudence, understanding, truth. She is faithful and a model of behavior. If you want to know how to live, then think of wisdom and all that she offers. She is ethical, something that politicians, preachers, and advertisers should emulate. Ethics. She is ethical. The truth wisdom brings is more important than wealth or power. Good government, righteous rule suggest wisdom is present. So we see that in Solomon's early reign, that he was good governor, had good government, and so forth. And later on, of course, he went off the rails. Wisdom is not opposed to wealth per se. She resists it if it's done for its own sake. So if you just want wealth for the sake of being rich and powerful, then that's not the good thing. That's not, wisdom doesn't resist that. Okay. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Proverbs 9:10. You want to go to the next slide? Okay, that's good. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We fear him. Now, this is a quote I got from Galley. He is the editor of Christianity Today. He wrote an article I thought was kind of interesting, and so I inserted this here. We fear him, not respect him, says Mr. Galley. We honor father and mother, and we respect authority, but we fear the Lord. There's a difference. Now, you may not agree with this quote, but for me, it's interesting. So to fear the Lord is something scarier, okay? Because he's the one that can throw your soul into hell. So here's the one to fear. We don't fear men. We fear God. If we fear God, then we become judicious, understanding, knowledgeable, astute. All of these are characteristics of one who is wise, okay? Because in living our life, if we had the fear of the Lord in our lives, then that would order how we live. Okay, we would become judicious. We would want to become understanding, knowledgeable, astute. Okay? These are the characteristics of one who is wise. Well, I think in the scriptures we see there are two kinds of wisdom. We don't have time to explore this. But there is the wisdom of God, and there is the wisdom of men. Somebody's phone is ringing here. There's the wisdom of men. 1 Corinthians 1:25 says, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." So, when God plays around, his foolishness, this is wiser than the wisest human there is. The wisest of human wisdom. When God, fools around in the way that God does. I don't know how he fools around or has fun doing something. Let's say, I think I'll make a galaxy or something like that. Well, his foolishness is wiser than the highest human wisdom there is. And the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. So there are these two kinds of wisdom. Our wisdom is not God's wisdom. It's lower, much, much lower than God's wisdom. But God can make men wiser. But let us be humble, understanding the immensity and boundless potentiality of being that God has. What does that mean? Well, this is interesting. If you think of a point in space, then God is there with everything he is. He's there with his total being. Go to another point, God is there with his total being. Go to another point, God is there with his total being. Boundless potentiality of being. That's what God is like. We are finite. We can't be like that. But, and of course our wisdom is not like the wisdom of God, but he can make us wiser. We can ask him, and he will give us wisdom and help us in time of need. Wisdom gives to all what she gives to kings. Righteousness, rule, wealth, honest speech, observance of righteous and just laws, and a refusal to make wealth the ultimate goal of life. As I mentioned earlier, in Hebrews, righteousness connotes the straight path, walking the straight path. And this is what wisdom gives us, the ability to walk the straight path, the skill set that we need to do that. The wise man is the one who builds his house on a solid foundation and has embraced Christ, the wisdom and power of God. Matthew 7:24-25. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came, the streams rose, the winds blew, and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. So the wise man is the one who builds his house on the rock, and that rock is Christ Jesus himself. So build your life on Christ. Fill your life with Christ. Study the scriptures. Get to know him. And then you will build your house on a solid foundation. And that's a wise thing to do. Finally, those who miss wisdom miss the mark. They are sinners. They are lost. For all have sinned, fall short of the glory of God. We need Christ. To sin is not to embrace wisdom. Wisdom cries out to all mankind today that God has now spoken in Christ, and we need to accept him. The wise person is the one who embraces the wisdom that leads to a saving knowledge of God. After all, as Jesus says in Mark, for whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul, as a lot of people are doing, seeking after wealth and neglecting their soul? They're forfeiting their soul. Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? You know, once I asked this, we were talking with a student, I asked him, do you believe that you have a soul? And he says, no, I don't believe in such things. And I said to him, well, what if you had a soul? And he said, well, so what? I don't have a soul. Okay, well, let's pretend you do have a soul. And I said to him, I'd like to buy your soul. I'll give you $1 for your soul. But you have to sign a contract that your soul is mine. Your fictitious soul is mine. You have to sign this contract. If you want your soul back, you give me back my $1, I'll give you back the contract. I'll rip it up. But your soul is mine. Wouldn't you like $1 for a fictitious soul? Then he got worried. He said, well, maybe I do have a soul. He was thinking, maybe I do have a soul. And then he says, no, I'm not going to give you my fictitious soul. And then he got really, obviously I challenged him. And then he walked away. But, I think deep down people know that there's something there, although they won't admit it, And so, what good is it if you gain the whole world but forfeit your soul? Or what can you give, in exchange for your soul? Your soul is so precious, it's you can't give anything for it. Okay, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory and with the holy angels. So riches won't cut it. We need to build our house on a solid foundation, which is in Jesus Christ. All we need for our salvation and spiritual growth is Christ himself, who is God's wisdom and power. To live like this is the way of wisdom. To live like this is to follow the path of wisdom. Thank you.